Friends, Bison country folk, great to be with you again, and thank you for making it this far. Parts 1, 2, and 3 were hard, and I'm not going to say I deliberately intended to make them like hard on you, but that's just what it is. It's hard. It's hard to get our history, despite our ideals, and to see how Wetiko has shaped it, in addition to our ideals and thousands of years of democratic debates around Native Council fires from Africa to Rhode Island. And it's hard to look at kind of how messed up it is. And you don't need a reminder because, let's see, what is it? April 4th, 2025. You're seeing it in the headlines. You're seeing just Wetiko, 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 Wetiko. It's like, it's everywhere. And it's hard to get that, like, there's no hope. Like, no technocrat, no politician, no white knight. Nobody is going to come within the current channel of the system and save us. We are shit out of luck. So thank you for moving with me into these spaces, and now the healing can begin. So before we dive in, another shout out to Jared Brickhouse Media for putting all this together, and to the American Prairie. So this is a gift in the spirit of the Bison, a giveaway. And if this resonates with you, please share it, review it on Amazon, and consider a gift to the American Prairie, an organization that partners with First Nations to acquire the land of the bison and protect it. So the healing begins today. Part 4, Bison Medicine. So I'll open up with a couple quotes here. The first from Fred Dubray, a Cheyenne River Sioux. Quote, "We recognize the bison as a symbol of strength and unity." End quote. Next from Deb Haaland, former U.S. Secretary of the Interior in the Biden administration. The American bison is inextricably intertwined with indigenous culture, grassland ecology, and American history. Now, if you'll recall, I opened up the book with a Carl Jung quote, which was, "An archetype can break through into a life or a nation with shattering force." And that is my hope for Bison Medicine. That's why this symbol, this giant blue, white, and red bison symbol put on the cover, like, it is intended to shock, to like, hey, we're changing the game with a different way of being. So that is the game we're playing for the rest of the book, but specifically in this part. To break the lock that Wetiko orphanages have in our lives and fulfill the promise of democracy, we need the, quote, shattering force and spiritual power of Bison Medicine. The symbol, strength, and guidance of our national mammal comes to our nation in this dark hour to offer us their medicine, a transpartisan national identity, ethical guidance, and a transformative community practice. They can lead us into greater fullness as individuals and as a nation, into a more flourishing, dynamic, creative, inclusive, and sustainable future, and empower us to remake every sector of society in its image. Now, the bison have long been part of our national identity, recognized as a state animal of Kansas, Wyoming, and Oklahoma, and as a symbol and seal of the Department of the Interior since 1912. Buffalo is also the name of a town in 18 states, and along with bison are the mascot of 103 high school, college, and professional sports teams. Further, the bison trails throughout the nation became the nation's first wagon trails and later our first roads. So in a very literal way, they shaped this nation. And of course, the First Nations burned the grasses and made it all, basically made it easy. And like the Buffalo, New York, where the bison get its name, is because the First Nations of that area said, we want the bison here. So they cleared a path from the Midwest all the way up through New York. So First Nations brought the bison, and the bison shaped the nation. Recognizing its spiritual, ecological, and economic power, the Intertribal Buffalo Council sought to solidify the bison's central role in our nation's history and identity. After 4 years of outreach to Congress and the White House, and building a coalition with the National Bison Association and the Wildlife Conservation Society, they were successful. They worked with Representative William Lacey Clay, a Democrat out of Missouri, Representative Kristi Noem, a Republican out of South Dakota, who was the governor, is now like Homeland Security now. So I shouldn't laugh. And Representative Jason Chaffetz, the Republican out of Utah, to bring the National Bison Legacy Act to the floor. So this is a bipartisan bill, obviously with a lot of help of the Intertribal Buffalo Council, National Bison Association, and the Wildlife Conservation Society. And this is pretty polarized time when this happened. This is 2016. The bill received unanimous support during a deeply divided election season. As Congressman Clay told me, quote, the bill is a victory for American history, a victory for Native people, and a victory for the legislative process, end quote. Each legislator who spoke in support of the bill revealed their unique connection to unifying, healing, and resilient medicine of the bison. So this first quote is from Representative Kristi Noem. And but this is before MAG. Like this is before everyone kind of lost their mind a little bit around this. This is where conservatives were just conservatives. Quote, I support the National Bison Legacy Act because it is a very important bill to the tribes in my state and also to the heritage of South Dakota and the United States. It is a bill that I helped Representative Clay of Missouri introduce. I'm thrilled to sponsor this bill with my colleagues to raise up an enduring symbol of our nation's Native American heritage, the American frontier, and the resilience that has long distinguished America from others around the globe. The Tatanka is important both physically and spiritually in Native American culture. These animals offered food, shelter, tools, and clothing. Native Americans could make soap from the fat and homes from their hides. Every piece was used, which is why the bison were and continue to be a symbol of survival and a cultural example of how to live in a healthy and productive manner. This bill recognizes that there are also lessons to be learned about resilience from these animals. Bison roamed across most of North America before nearly being wiped from existence. Through the efforts of tribes, ranchers, and conservationists and others, the species has survived and can once again be lifted as a literal and cultural example of productivity from which each of us can learn. I am proud that my family have raised bison as well. They are majestic animals that represent the plains that we are so proud of, that I am so honored to represent today, end quote. So this next one is from Representative Clay out of Missouri. The bison are dear to me because they have a historical and spiritual link to the United States colored troops, who were first organized in 1863 to 1866 as the 9th and 10th Cavalry and the 4 all-black infantry regiments. Despite facing relentless racism and woefully inadequate military supplies, nicknamed the Buffalo Soldiers because of their tireless marching and dogged trail skills, they had earned the name of the rugged and revered buffalo. By way of reference, my great-great-grandfather and his brother were members of the Buffalo Soldiers after coming out of slavery. The North American bison is a unifying symbol in the United States, end quote. And this final one from Representative Jason Chaffetz out of Utah. Quote, one of the most majestic animals on the face of the planet is the American bison. You go to see it and you just sit in awe and you think of the rich history and the role that it has played in our nation. I just want to say that I hope all Americans, especially the youth, get a chance to see one of the bison out in the wild. It was close to extinction, but it was brought back. There are hundreds of thousands of them now. End quote. So let's marinate on that for a beat here. Republicans, Democrats, Bison. Unanimous support of this bill in the House and Senate. Obama signed it. We agreed on this. And perhaps just like our founders, we couldn't constrain the power of the words of our purpose, all created equal, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, e pluribus unum. Perhaps those who push this forth, also maybe didn't understand what they were unleashing. But nonetheless, it happened. 2016, another big year for the nation. As we'll explore, Bison Medicine isn't just a subject of awe for civil servants, but a much more accurate expression of the purpose of the United States of America, which is, as I mentioned, all created equal, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, e pluribus unum. So it's much better an expression of our purpose than our national bird. The bald eagle is a raptor, a solitary hunter who swoops down from on high to steal, scavenge, and retreat to its perch to enjoy the spoils of conquest while avoiding any responsibility for the impact of its actions down below. This bird was described by Benjamin Franklin as, quote, of bad moral character. He does not get his living honestly. Too lazy to fish for himself, he watches the labor of the fishing hawk. And when that diligent bird has at length taken a fish, the bald eagle pursues him and takes it from him. With all this injustice, he is never in good case. But like those among men who live by sharping and robbing, he is generally poor and often very lousy. He is a rank coward, by no means a proper emblem for the brave and honest. End quote. So pause here for a second. I got nothing against the eagle. I think they're cool. It's just, what are we aspiring to? Our purpose, and what is the better symbol for that? I have heard among conservationists, they have kind of a dirty word for the eagle. They call them sky rats because they're often just kind of disgusting, and they're hanging out in dumpsters, and it's they're not disgusting. They're just an animal doing their animal thing, but we need to think about these symbols. Words matter, symbols matter, purpose matters. So that's really what the invitation here is. It's is this the right symbol for us? So now bring to mind the image of the bald eagle. What colors do you see? Like the distribution of wealth and power in our nation, the eagle is also white on top and brown on bottom. Perhaps this is why it was chosen to represent the Third Reich and the Roman Empire. Perhaps the symbol of the eagle serves a powerful purpose. It reminds us of our collective Wetiko. It also allows us to keep our shadows in front of us versus behind us and out of view. The eagle implores us to ask whether what we are doing serves the highest good for the Commonwealth, or if it serves the delusion of separation and isolation. This, of course, in no way diminishes the important role of eagles in our ecology. They play a critical role in regulating fish, snake, rodent, and bird populations and distributing nutrients from the water to the soil. This is also not to discount how many First Nations regard and use the medicine of the eagle, for example, vision and persistence, though this is more often associated with the golden eagle, not the bald eagle. But rather to assert that the symbol of the bald eagle is not the best match for our sacred purpose. It's not the best match for the interconnected nature of reality, nor the countless global problems we must now collectively and immediately address. Compared with the bald eagle, the bison have a presence and behavior that is much more consistent with our shared mammalian nature and the stated purpose of this nation. The bison elicit something deep in our souls. They connect us to rolling prairies, lush forests, rushing rivers, majestic peaks, the rising sun, a prismatic dusk and starry sky. They call us into individual and collective power. They call us into relationship with wild nature, play, community, and adventure. They ask us to be free, truly free, and connected to all of life. They beckon us to be grateful for natural beauty and summon us to care for all life. Just as the ancestors of our First Nations paddled and walked, sailed Bering Straits, Bering Land Bridge, the ancestors of the bison, it's their official name, bison, or what's known as the plain bison, and the bison athabasca, the North American wood bison. Just as they crossed this land bridge to Turtle Island, commonly known as North America, just as our democratic ideals evolved as they wandered the globe, so too did the bison. They adapted to a wide range of climates and terrain and got faster and smaller to avoid predators. In partnership with the First Nations, bison flourished from Oregon to Virginia, from Canada to Mexico. Many First Nations recognized the bison as their own nation. Think about that for a second. It was like, this is actually a nation. We need to relate to them with the same regard as we would another human nation. So this nation is one that they partnered with for physical and spiritual sustenance. They regard the bison as a nation worthy of care, respect, and honor. Some First Nations cosmologies, such as those of the Blackfoot, Crow, Cheyenne, and Kiowa, claim that the bison and human nations co-rose together and for the benefit of each other. Recent research suggests that the psilocybin mushrooms used in ceremonies for healing, growth, and renewal and rites of passage throughout the Americas hitched a ride with bison dung as they ventured out of Africa, through Europe, the Middle East, Asia, and obviously across the Bering Land Bridge. As the bison proliferated, feasting on a bounty of grasses, they brought life to the prairies, forests, and streams. They tilled the soil, dug up and protected fresh water springs. Through their wallowing, they created millions of seasonal ponds that benefited all of life. They tended this land, and they still do. So pause here for a second. I'll share more about this in a bit, but so literally the topography of the United States was shaped by the bison and the First Nations. So First Nations, burnt grasses or burnt prairies so that it would essentially make room for these grasses that the bison love. And the bison in turn shaped it through their play, through their wallowing. So they're always, you can kind of see them scratching their back and flipping them over, basically covering themselves in dirt and stuff like that to keep bugs away. But this wallowing, they found that some places were really good for it, and the bison just kept doing it in the same places, and it ended up creating, and it hard impacted Earth, that was a place for seasonal ponds. Now these seasonal ponds, insects, birds, reptiles, so they're not here anymore because we plowed them over. So making room for the railroad, for cattle ranches, all that kind of stuff. We flattened it all out. And so one of the reasons for the Dust Bowl is because all of this moisture now had no place to go. It just literally evaporated almost as soon as it fell down. In the past, it would have been held in these seasonal ponds. So when I say they tend this land, when we allow them to do their thing, they take care of it. They make sure that we don't have these huge ecological catastrophes. I'll share more about that here soon. So in this spirit, they still guide us to become fully who we are and meet the moment. As bison are neither liberal or conservative, they evoke and include a more powerful expression of both attitudes. With their guidance, we find greater compassion and power, greater equity and individual achievement, greater connection and self-expression. So let's explore a few of the teachings the bison offer us. So I should note Like, I'm not a bisonologist, right? My training's in business. Since formal education, I've studied mostly like psychology, spirituality, um, yeah, myth, narrative, mysticism, all that kind of stuff. So it's with that view, and then reading about bison behavior, bison social systems, uh, bison history, that I am perceiving moral teachings. So, I just want to, like, bison might have all these things, like they might have like a conscious relationship to these moral teachings, or they might not. This is just us observing them the same way that Franklin observed the eagle. It's me and a bunch of other folks observing bison behavior. So, first, being courage. So the trait of courage is evident because unlike cattle who run away from a storm and end up prolonging their suffering, the bison turn to face the storm and to move through it more quickly, to minimize their suffering and protect the most vulnerable. So the teaching here is that the medicine of courage allows us to face our hard truths. So we just did that in parts 1, 2, and 3. The shadows we must acknowledge and transform, our vertigo, arrogance, ignorance, bigotry, etc. And the necessary reforms and resources we must deploy to address the impact of our shadows, such as native genocide, enslavement of Africans, polarization, racial injustice, rape culture, climate change, and income inequality. Courage allows us to face our wetiko and groupthink. It allows us to opt out of bad situations, relationships, and dynamics. Courage gives us a voice to explain why we say yes to our purpose and values, and why we say no to what desecrates them. Courage is our license to share our wild ideas and dissenting opinions. So I'll pause here for a second. We're going to explore this later, but it does actually take a lot of courage to do this work. Like, if you're really going to own America, if you're going to give it credit where it's due, give it hell where it's due, it takes courage. You're going to piss off people. I'm pissing off people right now by saying we're on the wrong path, right? Because it essentially invalidates their whole identity, their whole worldview, the decades of mistakes that they've made, the wasted decades of their life force that they've given to these Wetiko ideals. So I don't say this lightly. Like, it could, you're putting your life at risk in some sense by standing for our nation, because there's a lot of folks out there who don't know what the nation is about. Like, as I've shared, most folks don't know our purpose. Most folks can't name a handful of states. It's all like, some groupthink self-interest thing. So thank you for your courage. And so I don't say it lightly. So let's move on. Care. So the second teaching is care. So the trait is that bison care for the most vulnerable, the young, the old, and the sick by placing them in the center of the herd. This is especially when there's threats. So, like, white folks pointing rifles at them, or packs of wolves, etc. So the teaching of care, this medicine, allows us to honor and heal our sick, depressed, traumatized, young, elderly, disabled, and the strategically undervalued populations. This way, BIPOC folks, LGBTQIA plus folks, women, etc. Care invites us to reimagine how resources are distributed and invested so that all beings have what they need to flourish. Further, this medicine and practice of care is itself a transcendent spiritual practice. So when you care for someone, especially someone who's not like you, you actually grow spiritually. So it empowers us to move beyond our own fears and desires in service of those in greatest need. The third one here, inclusion. I know third rail. Um, it's only a third rail if you like, you don't have care and courage at your side. Otherwise, inclusion is like common sense. So the traits. Bison share pastures and rivers with other large mammals, such as elk, moose, caribou, antelope, deer, and bear. Unlike predatory species, such as raptors or mountain lions or wolves or coyotes, who are territorial and are frequently skittish and aggressive, bison easily share space with other large mammals. They protect themselves only when their physical boundaries are violated. So pause here for a second. If you haven't been to Yellowstone, you'll see this. Like, they are not afraid of us. They're like, don't mess with me. But like, they're the 800-pound gorilla in the room. I mean, I don't know. They weigh a lot more than that. But like, they're just like, okay, what are you gonna do, antelope? What are you gonna do, bear? Actually, if you have curiosity, Google bear versus bison videos. They are often bloody, and it's hard to say who wins more, but they're yeah. And it's not because the bison are like, get out of here, bear. Usually bison accidentally stumble in the path between a grizzly and her young, and then the grizzly engages. But in general, you can find out in the wild a pasture, and you can see a bison herd, and you can see some deer, or an antelope herd, or a moose, or a caribou. They're not like, threat, must destroy, everyone, get them. They're not like that. They're like, cool. There's enough water, there's enough grass to go around. So the teaching here, the medicine of inclusion allows us to honor the dignity of all life, and celebrate the diverse backgrounds and gifts of all who reside here. It summons us to develop healthy and diverse relationships in our careers, communities, ecologies, and foreign policy. It invites us to consider what conditions of care and safety need to be present for each person to be included. Like, they can feel like they belong and have access to what they need to fulfill their potential. So I'm going to pause here for a second. When any of us design something for edge cases, take, for example, when we made the internet accessible for people with disabilities, the whole internet got better. Like, because we started to think about how to design things, design spaces, design, web pages for people with multiple different abilities. So this is kind of why inclusion matters, because if we want to create a place where all created equal, we have to be thinking from perspectives that are not our own. And that's what the bison bring to us. So like, oh, okay, how can we create neighborhoods, schools, hospitals, transit systems that care for everybody, that include the perspectives and needs and desires of everybody. So this medicine also invites us to reflect upon our own ways of being and behaving that exclude others, that support exclusionary and extractive ideas, entities, and practices. So it should go without saying that if we are going to follow the bison and take on inclusion, we have to look at our own exclusion. Like, I'm an Ivy League educated white dude, right? I need to be like very careful with how I talk about that, right? Or, welcome people into a space who haven't had, the privilege package that I've had, right? So it's looking at how I talk about everything, things I buy, the kind of work I do. Like, am I supporting exclusionary entities, exclusionary ideas, extractive practices? So it's a deeper meditation because it essentially forces everyone to be like an armchair philosopher, political scientist, because so much of our economy is Wetiko. It's built with extraction and exclusion in mind. Like, extract the resources and time and energy and life force from the many for the enjoyment of the few, and exclude the many from enjoying any of the profits, basically. So there's a sticky wicket here. You can go deep on this one. Let's look at the next one. So I believe this is 5. Independence. So the trait is bison also make themselves a priority. Although they move about as a herd, they can often be found wandering alone, as if solitude, leisure, and discovery were all that mattered. And there's an old saying among bison ranchers, quote, "You can get a bison to go anywhere it wants to go," which is a testament to the autonomy and independence of the bison. The teaching here is that the medicine of independence guides us to honor our truth and follow our passions. It allows us to mine our inner resources to meet our challenges, to creatively self-express, assert our agency and autonomy, and live in integrity with our highest self, our purpose. This is a medicine of self-love and self-care, empowering us to take stock, slow down, and listen to what our body and soul needs in each moment. The bison's movement within and without, within and without the herds point to a healthy balance of intimacy and solitude, a love of self and other. I'll pause here for a minute here. Reggie Mara, who wrote the foreword to this book, but also Healing America's Narratives, he provided me with this guidance that there is like essentially a teaching that is available to us when we get that we're a part of something, and that sometimes we need to leave to resource ourselves, to go on an adventure, to heal, to reflect, to pause, to rest. And that those two are like intertwined. It's not one or the other. It's not eagle or bison. It's like bison actually include a lot of the independent qualities of the eagle. So next one, play. This is one of my favorite ones. So the trait is that bison spend a good deal of time at play, laying about, wallowing, sparring, nudging each other, and running off together. The teaching here is that the medicine of play allows us to enjoy each other, our crafts, our art, our music, our games, our communities, our comedy, our questions, and the illimitable beauty of this land. Play calls us into whimsy, silliness, the laughter of children, dancing, costumes, theater, and comedy. Play is especially needed in healing in these dark times. So let's share a little bit about this. If you haven't seen bison play, it is truly remarkable to see these big, giant, Volkswagen buses like play with each other. And I've only seen it at Yellowstone. But yeah, like there'll be like one just kind of laying outside, and the other one come up and be like, "Get up, let's goof off." Be like, "No," it's like, "Get up, jerk!" Like, get up, and then the two of them will just like run up a hill and then run down a hill, and then somebody like, "What's next?" "Hey, let's run up that hill." Like, and so it's like, not everything has to be about survival. Like that is the medicine here. Like we're not supposed to be working hard. We talked about this in the last part. We can all thrive, not just survive. We can all thrive with 30% of our current energy resource and labor expenditure. We can thrive. So what does that leave? We have all of this time, much as the natives have, for leisure, for play, for creativity, for philosophical debate, for anything we want to do with it. We can have a much more full experience of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness if we follow the bison and the teachings of the native folks who were here first. So the next teaching is generativity. This is another big one. So the trait is that through their play, their wallowing, grazing, the bison till the soil. They protect these freshwater springs and have created millions of freshwater ponds throughout the country, although Almost all of them have been filled in or plowed over. And these springs and ponds provided an abundance of aqueous ecologies. As such, they are a keystone species, leaving every place they inhabit or roam better by cultivating a diversity of plant, insect, reptile, bird, and mammal populations. For example, where bison roam, 1/3 of all nesting birds, as well as rodents, use bison fur for their nests. So you've probably seen pictures of this where you'll see a bird on top of a bison. It eats the bugs, but when it needs to build a nest, it just like takes a little bit, like, hey, thanks. It makes its nest. Bison increase the biomass and carbon capture of their ecosystems by 500 to 1,500%. So what this means is that a herd of 170 bison, sequesters the annual carbon emissions of 43,000 cars a year. So let's think about that. 170 bison will take the emissions, the tailpipe emissions, and sequester them for 43,000 cars. This provides a powerful service to not only their local ecology, but to our entire biosphere. Bison meat fed natives and settlers alike, and it continues to feed us. Their presence is a gift. Their behavior is a gift. Their flesh, fur, and bones are gifts. It is no surprise that the bison are regarded as a symbol of genuine prosperity for many First Nations, a symbol of giveaway, of purpose, of generously contributing their gifts towards the betterment of all. Pause here for a second. There is such a thing as a gift economy. I've experienced it at Burning Man. It is essentially what people did prior to capitalism. There was no such thing as barter. I know many of us who studied business economics were told that that's, hey, everyone was bartering. It was complicated, messy. Nope, not a thing. Made up. No evidence for it whatsoever. There's still no society, like intact culture that barters. It's not a thing. Doesn't mean that we don't do it, white folks, European folks. But prior to, the age of empire, age of religion, it was all gift. Like if I had an abundance of something, I gave it. That is why this book, Bison Medicine, everything about this is intended as a gift. I've endeavored to remove as much transaction from this work as possible. I'm paying it forward in hopes that you all will receive it and pay it forward in your own ways, whether that's through supporting American Prairie, whether it's through investing in your purpose, your neighborhood, your community, your land. That's the world we're creating. That's the world that the bison have created for us. And so it is on us to follow this powerful teaching. So on that note, the teaching. The medicine of generativity invites us to once again reclaim our role as a keystone species, us humans as a keystone species, as so many First Nations have done and continue to do by shaping the land to protect and increase life. This medicine is one of partnership and listening, one of experimenting, learning, and sharing that allowed hundreds of First Nations to thrive in a wide range of diverse climates and ecologies. This medicine of generativity asks us to consider the impacts of our decisions beyond the next quarter, beyond the fiscal year or election cycle, and extend our care 7 generations ahead. So, pause here for a second. If we're going to be a keystone species, a steward of this beautiful blue dot, it means we have to think wide and long. So it's sustainable, just living wage supply chains. It's removing all of the extractive, exclusionary things that we're doing right now, like cars and jobs that extract from others. And cleaning up, cleaning up all the waste and harm. So there's repair in there. We'll talk about that in a bit. This medicine charges us with the task to leave every place better than we found it. It means picking up after ourselves and creating the conditions for others to flourish. It means not just rescuing folks drowning in a river, but marching upstream to prevent them from falling in. It means creating the conditions for all of life to be safe and flourish. It means implementing time-tested organizational structures and economic rules that enhance life, that have a net zero, living wage, externality-free supply chain and business model. It begs us to understand our core needs and consider the most elegant and generative way of meeting those needs. It guides our behavior and our relationships, career, civic life, and marketplaces, and orients us towards long, 7 generations, and wide views, interdependence. I had a thought I wanted to share on this. I think I lost it. All right, we'll move to the next one. Might circle back. Protection. So this trait. Bison are ornery if provoked. They are fiercely protective of themselves and the community, leveraging their incredible strength, ability to leap 6 feet in the air, their acceleration and speed of up to 40 miles an hour to avoid predators, and their horns, to toss and gore if necessary. Their existence depends on their ability to protect and fight. So, pause here for a second. It could be seen that bison have this maternal thing, similar to feminine, collective, mammalian, social. Yes, and they're also, that includes a fight. That includes mama bear energy. That includes do not mess with my people kind of thing. So bison mothers give birth alone, without the protection of members of their herd. As such, the strongest test of a bison mother is not the birth, but the ensuing battle she must withstand against the wolves watching her, as they always do. In the first few minutes after giving birth, she must fight upwards of 24 wolves to keep her calf alive and guide it back safely to the herd. Bison cows win more than they lose, but sometimes they lose their calves and even their own life. Bison remain vigilant in protecting their young well after birth, as it is estimated that wolves, we're always following the herds, right, kill upwards of 1/3 of all bison calves. So there's serious threat. Only 2/3 survive. 2/3 of the calves survive. The rest of the time, the moms lose. The wolves get in there. Something happens, and the wolves can take them out. So the teaching here is that the medicine of protection moves us not just to stop violence, but the causes of violence. So Wetiko's injustice and exploitation. As FDR said, quote, "We must do more than end war. We must end the beginnings of all wars," end quote. Given that more women and children die in war than men. Ending the beginnings of all wars means we honor and care for and expand the feminine in all matters. This means protecting women and children not only from violence, but the causes of violence, poverty, wounding, Wetiko. It means honoring and protecting sensibilities and virtues in boys and men that have been conventionally regarded as feminine. It means honoring and nurturing the emotional and creative expressions of not just girls and women, but boys and men. It asks us to protect the feminine in our ways of knowing, in our rights, languages, customs, careers, rituals, and organizations. Protection means having a sacred relationship with all life and aligning our lives, careers, and civic activities to honor, protect, and support life. Protection enlivens us with the spirit to tend to the social, emotional, and environmental health of our people and community, as well as the power and responsibility that every sector of society and every organization has to protect and enhance life. The medicine of protection charges us with stopping immediate harm without perpetuating further harm. It moves us to acknowledge responsible and complicit parties, beliefs, and behaviors. It doesn't respond to violence with more violence. Rather, it asks us to stop harm, summon our understanding, and deploy rehabilitative and restorative justice approaches to bring people back into the fold of their own souls and in right relationship with their community and the web of life. The medicine of protection means we set strong boundaries, but we don't sharpen our horns and turn them on each other. We don't arm ourselves to the gills with assault rifles designed solely to maximize human fatalities. Just as any reputable doctor would recommend surgery only as a last resort, we too must let the bison guide our foreign policy and public safety. We center our purpose and values in all matters, let them guide us, and resort to violence only when all else has failed. Never as a preventative measure, like the war on terror. Never as a course of business, like our current economic imperialism. Most importantly, protection begins at home. It invites us to protect others from ourselves by examining and transforming our own harmful beliefs and behaviors. Protection means we do our inner work ongoingly through men's, women's, and all gendered circles with our therapists, clergy, mentors, and coaches. So I'll pause here for a second. The Wetiko within us always has to be tended. Like our wounds, our hatred, whatever we're projecting on others, we have to keep it in front of us. And this is why the men's work for me has been like the baseline, like the drumbeat of my inner journey. Like I have to keep sitting in the circle once a week, once every other week to process and to make sure that I'm on mission, that I'm not acting out of fear, out of my shadows, out of Wetiko. And unfortunately, very few leaders do this work. There's a bunch of folks who have therapists. That's great. I got a complicated relationship with the idea of individual interventions for systemic and societal issues. But I want to encourage more collective approaches for all of y'all to be able to not only do your own work, but benefit from other people's work. That's why men's, women's, all gendered circles are so powerful. You can go, perhaps do some work yourself, but you get to witness the work of others. You're like, oh, I got that too. I need to look at that. I need to take some action here that I've been putting off or whatever. So if we really want to protect life, protect the most vulnerable, protect the feminine, protect our children and all of their sensibilities, creative, emotional, spiritual, we have to do our inner work to protect them from our BS. This last one's a doozy. I hope you like it. This is redemption. And so I don't name it as a trait of the bison. I actually call this a tragedy that we can then learn from. So the tragedy is to clear the West for farms and ranches of the settler colonialists, so white Europeans, and the mines and railroads of the wealthy industrialists. Our Wetiko guided us to enact a native genocide. We fought a multi-front genocidal war with countless tactics, including broken treaties, scalp bounties, death marches, cultural annihilation, forced religious conversion, rape, torture, raids, and starvation, so siege. A favorite and foundational war crime of all expansionary empires like ours is the siege. Starving people in order to kill them or force them into slavery and servitude. We starved the First Nations through the species side of the bison, one of their most plentiful and nutritious sources of food. We were almost successful, murdering 99% of all the bison that once roamed Turtle Island, resulting in the extermination of 90% of First Nations people. So about 50 million folks we exterminated. And the trafficking and enslaving and assimilating almost all of the remaining survivors. While we try to forget this chapter of our history, we cannot and will not. Because of the majesty of the bison, their moral and aesthetic value to us, I would say spiritual as well. It's my book. I guess I don't need to distinguish the guy who wrote it from the guy who's reading it. All right, let's start that one over. Because of the majesty of the bison, their moral, aesthetic, and spiritual value to us, and the critical role they play in our ecosystems, several brave conservationists in the late 1800s, including William Hornaday and President Theodore Roosevelt, led the charge to bring the bison back and many other endangered species. While other brave souls have engaged in the process of repairing the incalculable harm we've inflicted upon First Nations, these tragedies are far from being repaired. So the teaching of redemption, or teaching of the tragedy, is redemption. We can redeem ourselves. Bison remind us that we can and have repaired harm. We can always be redeemed. As the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. reminds us, quote, "The time is always right to do what is right," end quote. The medicine of redemption is unique because it is not a moral quality of the bison. They are not in need of redemption. We are. Redemption is a moral quality available to us when we recognize that we have been under the spell of Wetiko and can repair the harm we have caused. Just as John Newton, a former human trafficker, slaver, who wrote the song Amazing Grace, found his own redemption in abolition, we too must liberate the oppressed among us. We do this not just for their liberation, but for all of our liberation and redemption. If we honor and restore the bison to their full glory and repair the harm that we've inflicted upon our First Nations and the descendants of those we enslaved, and the dozens of countries harmed by our military, economic, and cultural warfare, we too can find redemption. By turning to the bison for guidance in our lives, I want to pause here for a second. Trying to remember who this activist is. Kimberly, I think Johnson. But she spoke during the summer of 2020. Well, there was mostly peaceful protests and marches, but there was also, in some instances, like the destruction of stores and the Hall of Fame, Target. And she gave this really passionate speech about why the social contract was broken in December 2020. She ended it with "You're lucky that all we want is equality and not revenge." So think about that for a second. First Nations, Black folks, women have every right to want revenge. Every right. You'd want it. But that is not what most oppressed folks want. They don't want to become the oppressor. They just want the United States to fulfill its purpose of all created equal. That's it. We're willing to forgive. We got to repair. We have to recognize, reckon, and repair the harm. And we can forgive and we can play nice together. We can forgive our ancestors, forgive ourselves for benefiting from the dynamics that they set up. So my white privilege, right? But we have to do the hard work. We have to bring in courage and care and inclusion, repair the harm, and then we can be redeemed. Okay. By turning to the bison for guidance in our lives, careers, and civic activities, we can become whole. While our path to reckoning, repair, and redemption is far from complete, we are on our way. The die has been cast. The medicine of redemption also invites us to hold a view that no one is worthless or beyond redemption or undeserving of the care of the village. As we are not beyond redemption for our many sins, so too is every living being not beyond redemption. So, taken together, we have a model for a noble life, another path to the good, true, and beautiful. As any creed or set of ethics faithfully upheld makes us better humans and better citizens, we could faithfully ingest this medicine and become the type of people necessary for a democratic society to function. As the Haudenosaunee knew and executed, and as Montesquieu and Tocqueville echoed, where faith guides our behavior, the control of the state is not necessary. I'll put a pin in here for a second. We've already talked about Native morality, respect, liberation, restraint, and pretty much aversion to hierarchy and external control. So if we really want to drown the government in a bathtub, we have to essentially become emissaries of the divine. So when faith, when ethics, whether it's Bison ethics or Christian or Jewish or Islamic or Hindu or Sikh or whatever it is, if we want to be free, if we want to have as few encroachments of the state upon our behavior, we have to become like Christ. So, yeah, you don't get to have like total freedom without being spiritually purified, and that's time-tested wisdom here from many cultures. And it's not like we have to give up our current faith traditions to practice this medicine. If you soften your eyes, it's easy to see Christianity, the religion claimed by 2/3 of us, in these teachings. We find Christ's compassion in the bison's care. We seek Christ's forgiveness in the bison's inclusion. We feel Christ's fearlessness in the bison's courage. We become our brother's keeper through the bison's generativity and protection. We see Christ's 40 days in the desert in the bison's long saunter. As the teachings of the bison can renew us as Christians, they can also guide us to become better Jews, Muslims, Buddhists, Hindus, and Mormons. For example, in Judaism, we realize the bison's care in, I'm going to do my best to pronounce these, Gemalut Hasadim, or loving kindness, and Kahila, community. Inclusion in Kavod, which means respect, and Haknasat Orhim means welcoming guests. Generativity in Tzedek, which means righteousness. And Tzedakah, which means charity. And redemption in Tikkun Olam, which means to repair the world. And yet, there are good reasons that we are leaving our legacy religions in droves. We explored this in part 2. Most religions lack a coherent origin story, one that resonates with and amplifies the findings of the scientific tradition. Most have distanced themselves from or have forgotten their mystic and soul initiation pathways into adulthood and elderhood. While all faiths profess a set of life-giving virtues, due to our Wetiko, the practice of these virtues varies widely, leaving many of us out in the cold spiritually. The bison offer us a both and, spiritually and morally. Their teachings allow us to be both good disciples of our religious faiths and better citizens in a multi-faith, multicultural democracy. The 2-part Bison Medicine protocol, number 1, the activation of your unique purpose in number 2, true community, that you'll discover in part 9, allows each of us to rediscover an initiatory pathway that deepens our experience of faith in ourselves and each other without requiring us to submit to any particular faith or to a new faith. And if we're being honest, we can also project another set of qualities onto the bison, such as mindlessness, conformity, or fear, because bison can also be driven off cliffs. They can also sacrifice slow-moving members of the herd in a panic. They can also get stuck in the mud and drown in fast-moving water and perish by the thousands. Perhaps they too struggle with their own Wetiko. Or we try something else altogether. Just as we contain Whitman's multitudes, so do the bison. Like humans, the bison refuse to be completely penned in, both physically and metaphorically. They keep us guessing at who they are and who we are. They only ask that we pay them the attention and reflect. So I'm going to share a quote here from Stephen Ranella, whose book, American Bison, is like, I forget American Buffalo. It's amazing. You got to read this book. If you're like geeking on the bison, Stephen Ranello's book is really good. It's where I got a lot of this data that supports bison behavior. So, quote, I sometimes imagine that we saved the buffalo from the brink of extinction for the simple reason that the animal provided a handy mirror in which we could see our innermost desires and failures and our most confounding contradictions. Our efforts to use the buffalo as a looking glass have rendered the animal almost inscrutable. It at once is a symbol of the tenacity of wilderness and the destruction of wilderness, a symbol of the Native American culture and the death of Native American culture. It's a symbol of strength and vitality of America and the pettiness and greed of America. It represents the frontier both forgotten and remembered. It stands for freedom and captivity, extinction and salvation. Perhaps the buffalo's enduring strength and legacy come from this chameleonic wizardry, this ability to provide whatever we need at the given moment, end quote. So what does this mean for us? It means that we can invite Bison Medicine to work on us individually, to bring us whatever we might need in the moment, to allow this medicine to move through us into greater courage, care, inclusion, play, independence, protection, generativity, and redemption. It means we can turn to this medicine as we confront, heal, and transform the vertigo in our beliefs, behaviors, and orphanages. We can turn to it to shine a light on our formidable national shadows of arrogance, ignorance, fear, bigotry, violence, greed, excess, bullying, and untrustworthiness. It means we courageously and continuously do our inner work, heal our traumas, reflect, repair the impact of our sins, activate our purpose, and contribute our gifts to create a more flourishing world. Now, let us provisionally swallow this potent medicine and see if it helps us understand what our shared purpose actually means and what it calls each of us to do. That concludes part 4. Here's the summary and the reflection. Bison Medicine came to us in our dark hour with intertribal and bipartisan support. The bison is a better symbol of our stated purpose than the bald eagle. Bison Medicine guides us into greater courage, care, inclusion, play, independence, protection, generativity, and redemption. It deepens our faith and empowers us to be the type of people who uphold and fulfill the promise of democracy. Reflection, discussion questions. First is, in which areas of your life do you act like an eagle? In which areas do you act like a bison? What does the tension between the two reveal about your life today? If we waved the magic wand and presto changeo, Bison Medicine was now our new cultural norm, felt, experienced, and governing every sector of society. What would be possible for our nation now? If you were the screenwriter of a movie about our nation, why did you choose 2016 to be the year that we consecrated the bison as our national mammal? What role do you want Bison Medicine to play in our nation's next act? Thank you, folks. I promise it's all uphill from here. It'll continue to be, I hope. Please support American Prairie. Thank you again to Jared Brick House Media. And of course, you can learn more about all this stuff at bisonmedicine.com. Community, bonus content, gear, anything you want, or just reach out to say hi. All right, see you soon, folks.